Hi, Chad, Versamatic. Today we're going to install a wet end kit into our E1 plastic non-metallic center pump. Today on the bench we have an E1 plastic non-metallic center pump with our Versamatic genuine parts, a wet end kit, and an air end kit. The rebuild you're going to see is accurate in man, method, and machine, but for video purposes, some parts of the work performed have been condensed in time. At any point during the presentation, please pause this video until you have completed any part of the process. The pump we are using in this presentation has been built new and is considerably easier to work with than a pump that has been used in a process. Additional time may be required in the preparation and separation of parts and components during the rebuild. Identifying which kit is required for your repair has become easier on newer pumps with the permanently affixed metal serial number tag that now indicates the wet end and air end kit information for the pump. Kit information can also be found in the service and operating manual. Versamatic genuine replacement parts, wet end and air end kits provide a bill of material of the components included in the kit. All items included in the kits are components that Versamatic recommends replacing when rebuilding a pump. The pump we are using today is an example of the ease of installation. Always consult your respective service and operating manual before performing any maintenance on your pump. Service and operating manuals include composite repair parts drawings, repair parts list, and torque specifications. For service and operating manuals and more information, visit us on the web at www.versamatic.com. Always remember that safety is the highest priority. When working on or around any equipment, always follow the correct safety procedures. Always read and follow the safety warnings and instructions in the service manual before any work is started on the pump. For more information, see the warm-up video on safety at versamatic.com. Today our wet end rebuild will include the following items: diaphragms, check balls, valve seats, and O-rings. These are the recommended tools used with the rebuild. While the sizes may change based on the model, the type will remain the same. Torque wrench, ratchet, small slotted screwdriver, O-ring pick, Phillips head screwdriver, sockets and/or wrenches, 1/2 inch, 7/8 inch, 5/32 inch socket head Allen wrench. Alright, let's get started. Today we're going to use a 3/8 drive impact gun for ease of disassembly and reassembly. First we're going to start off by removing our discharge manifold. Now set aside the discharge manifold for later rebuild. Note check balls and valve seats, be sure to remove before you rebuild the pump. Now remove the main air valve. Now remove the suction manifold. Set aside the suction manifold for later rebuild. Remove the valve seat O-rings. Remove the valve seats and check balls. Now remove the discharge valve seat O-rings. Remove the valve seats and check balls. Now remove one outer chamber. Set aside our outer chamber for later rebuild. Now remove one diaphragm assembly. Set aside our outer plate. Remove the diaphragm. Remove the inner plate. Remove the opposite outer chamber and set it aside for later rebuild. Now remove the second diaphragm assembly with the diaphragm rod. Now we're ready to rebuild our diaphragm assembly. Versamatic shafts have wrench flats on the rod to assist in diaphragm removal and installation when performing maintenance in the field. Today we will use a vise with soft jaws. Soft jaws are utilized to ensure that the shaft is not scarred, scratched, or damaged while the shaft is clamped in the vise. Remove the outer diaphragm plate and discard the old diaphragm. Inspect the outer diaphragm plate radius for any damage or wear or any sharp edges. These sharp edges can be addressed with sandpaper, crocus cloth, or emery cloth. The same applies to the inner diaphragm plate. Inspect the radius or any damage and replace as needed. Inspect the main shaft for any scarring or scratching or damage and replace as needed. Now we're ready to install our wet end kit. Note the orientation of the diaphragm and the part numbers, the material codes. Be sure to install natural bulge in. Fully seat the outer plate and note the orientation of the inner diaphragm plate and the radius faces towards the diaphragm. Hand tighten in the outer plate and torque to factory specification to the main shaft. Apply light grease to the main shaft. Grease is applied to keep the items from catching, binding, or cutting while assembling components. Now inspect the outer chamber. Inspect the integrity of the casting, the radius that the diaphragm rolls across. You can dress up these edges with a light sandpaper, crocus cloth, or emery cloth. Inspect the ball cages on the suction side for any sharp edges and lightly sand. Chamber orientation requires the discharge side of the chamber to be installed in the same direction as the air valve face on the center block. When tightening down the outer chamber bolts, tighten in a cross pattern and torque to factory specs. Now we're ready to install our opposite diaphragm assembly. Note the orientation of the diaphragm and the part numbers on the diaphragm. Inspect the radius of the outer diaphragm plate. Inspect the integrity of the outer diaphragm plate. On this particular pump, the natural bulge is in on the diaphragm. Inspect the inner diaphragm plate. Note the orientation of the inner diaphragm plate with the radius facing towards the diaphragm. Begin to hand tighten the diaphragm assembly to the main shaft and torque to factory specification. If you achieve torque and the bolt holes on the diaphragm do not align with the center section of the pump, always go forward and never back off. Be sure all bolt holes align. Inspect the outer chamber for casting integrity. Inspect the machine surfaces and radius of the chamber for damage or material buildup. Note the orientation of the outer chamber on the opposite side in relation to the center section of the pump. Be sure to torque the outer chamber bolts to factory specifications in a cross pattern. Now we're ready to install our suction check balls and valve seats. Install check balls. Note the orientation of the valve seat
Be sure to install the valve seat so the O-ring groove is facing towards the suction manifold. Now install the valve seat O-rings. Be sure to fully seat the valve seat O-ring into the O-ring groove. We want to inspect the manifold for scarring, damage, or material buildup. Check the casting for wear. Check the port for thread integrity. Repair or replace as needed. Orientation of the manifold is based on process requirements and may be reinstalled in either direction. When tightening the suction manifold, be sure to tighten the bolts in a cross pattern and torque to factory specifications. Now we're ready to install our main air valve assembly. Be sure the bolt holes and piloting holes all align with the center section of the pump. When tightening the main air valve to the center section of the pump, be sure to torque to factory specs in the cross pattern. Inspect the discharge manifold machine surfaces, the integrity of the casting. Inspect the ball cages for any sharp edges. Lightly sand if needed, or replace as needed. Install the check balls into the discharge manifold. Note the orientation of the valve seats so that the O-ring groove or step in the valve seat faces towards the outer chamber. Be sure to fully seat the valve seat O-ring into the designated O-ring groove. Orientation of the manifold is based on process requirements and may be reinstalled in either direction. Now tighten down our discharge manifold. Be sure to bring the bolts down snug and torque in a cross pattern according to factory specifications.
This concludes our wet side rebuild. When doing a complete rebuild, see our airside video. Or for additional information, find us on the web at versamatic.com or contact after sales support at service.versamatic@idexcorp.com. Thank you.